Yeah, I guess the difficulty in taking effectively 6 halves is that it limits the coverage you have elsewhere. And I think I said last week that there is a degree of risk no matter what you do, and we just feel that it's something that we can manage with the cover that we have got. And we feel that we've got some super resources here, as disappointed as they are in Isaac Boss and Kieran Marmion, that if we do strike trouble, despite the 48-hour rule, we can get a replacement in pretty quickly.
Joe, obviously some big calls, the exclusion of Andrew Trimble.
Yeah, look, if it wasn't a big call being Andrew Trimble, it would have been a big call being somebody else in the back three. I know that had probably been the most discussed position. I think we spent 6 hours on Sunday, and for some of those hours, Andrew Trimble was coming to the World Cup with us, and some of them he wasn't. That's how tight it was. And I think the difficulty was that Andrew had played 34 minutes of a test match. He'd played 80 minutes for Ulster, but in between that, he'd hurt the foot again, and it just interrupted his opportunity to best press for selection, and time ran out for him. Certainly, ability, commitment, and what he's contributed when he has played for us, all certainly counted for him, and that's why it was one of the very, very difficult decisions we made.
In terms of delivering that news, how did he take it? How did he take that news?
He's a great fella. He's very disappointed, but he's keen to keep working, and I think there's a number of players who are in that situation, and unfortunately, you get to establish pretty strong relationships with these players because we work so hard with them, and so closely with them that it's disappointing for us as well as for them, but it's the brutal reality of what we have to do.
Come back to the scrum half. Will Madigan be cover, or would he play any part in that?
Yeah, Ian Madigan will cover scrum half.
Yeah. Is it going to be game time between now and maybe even the early rounds?
Potentially, that's something that we will sort through. But he has done a lot of training, individual training. He hasn't trained in the team very much, but in the last week he started to slot in and do a little bit with the team as well.
So would you see it as a calculated risk then if he has that kind of
I'd like to think it's calculated. I'd like to think that we've given it as much thought as we could, and we just felt that it allowed us a little bit more flexibility further out, and it is very difficult because I actually thought Isaac Boss played really well against Scotland. I think there were a couple of passes that were not as good as they could have been, but I think Chris Henry's try, I think he would have struggled to get over without Isaac punching him over, and that sort of physical aspect to his game is something we'll miss. And I think Kieran did well against Munster recently as well. So, to a degree, that risk is managed by the 48-hour rule and by the opportunity of getting someone in within that time, particularly with the proximity of the World Cup to Ireland. But it was the balance we went for at the time.
Was it a late decision, Joe, as late as this past week, or were you considering it all along?
It was in the back of our minds, probably not in the forefront, but it was in the back of our minds. I spoke to Ian about it last season, so it's not suddenly something. Ian did some work on it in the off season, so he's been quietly preparing himself for that potentially to happen. But it's I've got to say honestly, it wasn't what we were probably going to do, but there's a few players we had discussions with about potentially covering different positions, because we knew that we couldn't have total coverage with 31 players.
What was your thinking behind the Providence situation with the three tight end specialists, and then two, is it, will we see Ty Furlong cover both?
Yeah, he's been doing some good work at Loosehead in training. He's played Loosehead when he was younger, although that can't have been too long ago because he's still very young. But he's really impressed us. I think, you know, again, apart from taking 6 specialist props, there's not too many ways around that, other than Michael Bent is probably very unlucky to miss out. I think he acquitted himself really well in the environment. His work ethic is first rate, and he was very close. And you know, in this, I suppose, 6-hour process, you know, his name was on the sheet and off it a number of times, and we tried to make that as robust as possible, and tried to even then reflect and go back over what we'd done, and we feel that we have got sufficient balance with 2 absolute specialist tight heads and 2 specialist loose heads, and Tig, who is a specialist tight head but has covered loose head in the past and has trained there effectively enough to convince us that he could scrum there. I mean, I thought he did really well in the weekend against a player who's very difficult to scrum against, a player who angles and takes the scrum down, and I thought Ty kept him up as best he could and kept him out as best he could, and you know, I think from that perspective it was a fairly tough baptism to Test match rugby.
Joe, Darren Davies is a guy who said he maybe fell on the outside at times and maybe a year ago, but he's really had a transformation and pushed himself right in there. How has his journey been?
Yeah, I think again with the midfield situation that we have, we feel like we've got enough cover, but it's a little bit of a manufactured midfield. I think Robbie hadn't played 12 until he came into this environment. Jared had played more fullback than 13, and Robbie had played more fullback than 13, probably in recent years. So that's a little bit manufactured for us. We wanted to get one specialist midfielder in there who could play 12 or 13. His flexibility and positivity in the environment are real pluses for us. We've had the opportunity to give Keith Earls some game time at 13 and Luke Fitzgerald some game time at 13. So we feel that amongst those 5 plus Ian Madigan who can move in there. But once we decided, I know this might sound complicated, it seemed complicated on Sunday, having Ian cover 9 and 10 as the third 9, to expect him to cover 12 as well is a little bit more of an expectation, and therefore we wanted to again go with the specialist 12 and 13. And Darren's performances, both at training and in the match against Wales in the Millennium, meant that he was pretty deserving player to be involved.
How was Keith Earls actually after Saturday?
Yeah, he's very good. He is following the return to play protocols, so he hasn't trained with the team. He won't be involved in the weekend, but he is. I'd say he'd be cleared to play by the weekend following the protocols, because there's no recurring problems.
Yeah. Do you have a standby list? You know, let's say if we had a discussion with Andrew Trimble, do you tell him you're going to be our first choice?
Yeah, we do, and we have quite a wide number of players. Some players would be closer to being involved than others, but certainly in the back 3 with Felix Jones, who has been an unbelievably positive contributor and has that utter reliability as part of his what's in his locker. We feel with Andrew Trimble, Felix Jones and Fergus McFadden again. Fergus McFadden is a goal kicker He kicked a very nice goal at Donnybrook and missed one right from the edge, not by far, on Friday evening. Plus he has a little bit of flexibility to cover the midfield, so we'd probably adapt with that. I think when we decided that Simon Zebo had played well at fullback and Rob Carney, we believe, played well on the weekend, to have 3 fullbacks was probably too many. And Felix has played on the wing for us as well, but we had other specialist wingers, and you know, it was again those 3 players probably appeared on the list as often as they didn't, and at the end of the day, that was the balance that we went for with the 31 we've selected.
You're obviously happy with Ian Healy's progress as well. Will he get come against England?
He's cleared to play. He's fit to play. I think that's just probably the only problem with that would be is he ready to fit in and play? He's been working a lot individually. He's been in and out of team sessions, but quite often not doing the whole session, doing different bits and pieces of it. So, you know, he's acquitted himself well on these first 2 days, and we sort of thought we'd have a look at how that went, and then, you know, kind of confirm a decision on Thursday around Cian.
Were those phone calls, you know, like the guys who on the fringes, the likes of Andrew Trimble, were they emotional? Were guys accepting of your decisions?
As I said, I think, you know, I'd like to think the relationships with players are reasonably positive, and you know, I think it was probably me that was more emotional than the player. The player, you know, they knew what the decision was when they saw my name on their phone, you know, and they were resigned to the fact when they answered the call. So it was then, you know, difficult to have the conversation with them. But you know, it's incredibly encouraging for me, being the one making the phone call, is how positive they were about, I'm going to keep making decisions difficult for you. I'm going to keep working, and I want to be involved in the future. I want to be involved in the very short-term future, because with a game against England, who are looking to rebound from a performance that they wouldn't have been happy with in France, we know with the nature of the game that some of those guys could be involved from the very start of the tournament, and you know, we certainly hope we get through with a clean bill of health so that we get some continuity and a little bit of momentum. But if it was those guys coming in, it's a little bit of a security blanket knowing the quality of them.
Joe, last question there, please. Guessing yourself at all since those phone calls are made, or is it very important that now you're trying to 31 that you're just focusing on what's coming down the tracks and everything to this point is now behind you? Yeah, I think we got the second guessing out of our system in the 6 hours that we spent arriving at the decisions. I'd be personally of a belief that once you've made a decision, once you've taken a course of action, you're fully committed to that being the correct course of action. And if you have self-doubt, and I do about so many things, that it's important you kind of conquer that with what's ahead of you, and trying to plan to be as effective as you possibly can, and helping a group prepare to meet what challenges are in front of them. Okay guys, we will shut down the broadcast and online section now, and we will start the